Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with 12rounder.com here to give you the aftermath for the Omaha, Nebraska event that was broadcast by HBO, headlined by lightweight titleist Terence Crawford taking on tough veteran Ray Beltran. Also had an undercard that we'll get into first. It was a featherweight contest with unbeaten titleist Jenny Gradovich taking on unbeaten contender Jason Velez. It was a pretty entertaining fight. It certainly had its ebbs and flows. Early on, it seemed like Velez was smartly trying to just counterpunch, pot shot, block a few shots, and tried to effectively stick to a condensed version of himself. He can get a little wild at times. He can throw with even more power than he attempted to in the Gradovich fight, and probably was the harder puncher out of the two in the ring on the night. However, he seemed again to be shortening up his shots and thus taking something off of his shots in favor of speed, accuracy, and so on. That being said, the pure pressure of Gradovich, who can definitely take a punch to begin with, so it wasn't as though those sort of half-powered shots were going to negate what he was going to do, and the fact that he is a pure pressure fighter, the pressure of Gradovich ultimately became the story of the fight, and how much he could pressure his man and how much his man could take of that pressure. In the end, he took quite a bit of it. Lasted the 12 rounds, his first 12-round fight, but that being said, the 12-round distance did seem to get to Velez a little bit. The talent level that the two have faced is just a bit different. Gradovich has been in there with some better names and the Billy Dibbs of the world and what have you, whereas Velez effectively tried his hand against one of the better guys in the division for the first time on the night against Gradovich. And all of these things they manifested in this fight and towards the end of it, especially where Gradovich is with his experience and his better understanding of who he is as a fighter seemed to take over the fight. That being said, it was a split draw in the end, with many believing that Gradovich probably did enough to win. Even Velez seemed a bit dejected even when the scores were read and he had realized he kept his professional unbeaten record intact. But it was a sort of fight where good fight, but it doesn't seem as though Velez is going to feel so robbed that he's going to be calling for a rematch, and Gradovich has some potentially more interesting fights on the horizon, so I'm sure we'll be seeing him in some different sorts of fights later on in his career, next year more particularly. Then in the main event, we saw Terence Crawford do what Terence Crawford does. He switched southpaw, he stayed orthodox, he stuck out the jab, he counterpunched, took a couple of shots, but mostly had great defense, could take the shots he had to take, and overall just be the better man, the better part for the most part, in that whole fight. Beltran stayed in the pocket too much, it was one of those things where he stayed at a distance where he could do nothing, yet Crawford could do just enough to take every single round in fairly convincing fashion. Beltran put up a good effort for himself. It wasn't anything to be ashamed of, but at the same time, I think it was sort of like commentator Roy Jones said, if you're going to get hit, you might as well be in position while you're getting hit to get your own shots off. And I think it's one of those situations where Beltran will look back on this fight and realize he might have missed out on a few opportunities. That being said, very, very interesting fight for the most part. It was had its dull moments from time to time, but again, I'd blame Beltran for that more than Crawford, as Crawford, when he was hit, was ready to engage, was always there to come back, to answer back, and to try and put a hurting on his guy to the point where he'd stay in control of the fight. Beltran just didn't do enough, and ultimately the scores reflected that, and it was a wide, unanimous decision for Crawford. Moving forward, of course, he has plenty of options, especially moving up to 140 pounds, with the rumors, or the suggestions, more accurately, of Manny Pacquiao moving down to 140 pounds, and with a couple of decent fighters there, and Jesse Vargas and the like, you might see some, that are all, mind you, top-ranked fighters, you might see some very interesting fights in, say, a year's time. So it could be a very interesting time in Terence Crawford's career, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it, what you thought of the fights, and what do you think is going to happen moving forward for all four fighters involved. With Beltran especially, it seems he's good enough to beat everyone except the guys he has to beat to be one of the top fighters. So it's interesting to see where a guy like he goes as well. And of course, tell me your comments on the fights and your opinions on the fights in the comment section below, as well as on Twitter at 12rounderboxing. Love to hear from you. Give me all your thoughts and so on and so forth. Of course, be sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, all that great stuff. Love to hear from you. But until next time, enjoy the fights.